Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Getting Started with Modern Endpoint Management, brought to you by our friends at Quest. Thank you so much for joining us on the webinar today. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. As always, we want these events to be educational, and we encourage your questions there in the questions pane of the audience console. Before we get started, there's just a few things that you should know about the event. We do have a number of resources there in the handouts tab. I encourage you to check those out before you leave the event today. Always some great resources there brought to you by our friends, our experts presenting on the event. We also, of course, have our Amazon $300 gift card door prize for those who are on the live event. If you're watching this on demand, of course, that drawing has already occurred. And as I mentioned, we have the questions pane there as well in your audience console. That's where you can ask questions during the event. Of course, we appreciate those questions. We know that these are tough times out there in the world of IT, trying to protect your company's data, your company's most crucial resource, from malicious attackers that are just coming in right and left. And we'll be talking about that on the event today. So it's a great time to improve your endpoint management. It's a great time to strengthen your company's security. And endpoint management is one of the best ways to do that. So before we get started, I should point out that we also have our best question prize for an additional Amazon $50 gift card. Of course, you must ask a question to be entered into that prize drawing and meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions that you can find right there in the handouts tab of your audience console. All right, so before I introduce you to our expert presenter today from Quest, I want to just kind of set the stage here briefly on the state of endpoint management and kind of all the scary statistics that are happening around our industry today. But first, here's what you're going to learn on today's webinar. You'll find out additional clarity on exactly what modern endpoint management is. Maybe you have some sort of endpoint management solution in place, but really, is it a modern system? Is it using the latest technology? Is it using the most secure methods? And those are the types of things that we'll be talking about. You'll also understand points regarding your business environment, regarding endpoint protection, what you need to know, what you need to be looking at. And then finally, a strategy for managing your devices and your company's personnel out there who really are your users who are using these devices on a daily basis. Sometimes they're company owned, sometimes they're personal devices, and sometimes it's a variety of those. But first, let's talk about the challenges that we're really all facing here in the world of IT. I mean, we have some scary statistics out there. As most of you know, ransomware is just rampant. But just how rampant is it? Well, according to Cybersecurity Ventures, a new business will fall victim to ransomware every 11 seconds. That's incredible. I mean, I'm not going to do the math here, but by the time this webinar ends, so many hundreds of businesses will have fallen victim to ransomware. And I mean, if that isn't crazy enough, you might get the idea, though, that this is just impacting very large organizations, the companies that you see, maybe on the evening news, maybe, the government or airlines or hospitals or something like that. But according to a survey by Malwarebytes, 35% of SMBs were victims of ransomware. And, really, of those that were impacted, of those 35%, which is a third of SMBs out there, 22%, or roughly a quarter of them, had to stop operations of some kind. So they had to shut down, they had to stop making money, stop doing what they do to serve their customers because of a ransomware infection. And it's happening, even in small towns like where I live. The local fire department was infected with ransomware for quite a few days, and I can only imagine what that did to their ability to go out and protect the citizens of the city. So Other statistics here, 81% of SMBs have experienced some sort of ransomware infection, and 66% of SMBs have experienced some kind of data breach. So, I mean, scary statistics all around. And the big question is, well, what's the source? Where's this coming from? How do we stop these types of infections, whether you work at a small company or a large company? The source in many cases is really the same. You know, when it all comes down to it, in many cases, it's endpoints that that end up being the source in one way or another of these types of malicious attacks. And endpoints today might not just include your local desktop and laptop, but also, you know, BYOD devices, people working from home, mobile devices, IoT devices. There's a lot of different types of endpoints, and we'll be talking about that on the webinar today. So organizations really have to secure their endpoints if they hope to prevent these types of data breaches, because those endpoints are really the gateway to your organization's systems, and they're also operated by humans who make mistakes, humans whose curiosity sometimes gets the better of them when they can't resist to click on, you know, the email that says, hey, you just won the lottery. You know, we need to have systems in place to protect humans from themselves as best we can. And then to make things even more complicated, you know, our view of traditional endpoints that are in the company's physical building no longer really exists. These endpoints are strewn, you know, across the globe, or at least on employee home networks with the explosion of everyone working from home. And so the definition of endpoint has really become much broader than you might think. You know, there's not only desktops and laptops strewn across the globe, but also phones, IoT devices, HVAC systems. You know, everything's on the network today. And so really anything on the network is an endpoint that needs protection. And it's also a lot more than just, you know, the Windows operating system. We think, oh, well, it's just Windows that's getting infected, but that's not true. It's Mac, it's iOS, Android, Linux, even, you know, Chromebooks, all sorts of devices out there have some sort of malicious, you know, endpoint that could be needs to be protected. So studies have shown that to fix these types of data breaches and ransomware infections, it's going to take a whole lot more than just traditional antivirus software. We need to prepare ourselves and our company with the most modern endpoint management solution available. And that's why we're here today, to learn about how we can better protect ourselves using modern endpoint management. And so with that, I'm excited now to bring in Mr. Jody Evans, who is a product manager at Quest, to help educate us on modern endpoint management. Help us get started. Jody, it's great to have you. Take it away.
Thanks, David. Happy to be here. Good day, everybody. As he mentioned, I'll verify. My name's Jody. We'll get moving into some slides here that I've got to talk about. What is modern management? You may have heard that term before. Hopefully today I can try to answer some questions around that particular term and give you some more clarity. So I think to understand this term, I think we need to kind of zoom out and look at the overall landscape of device management there. And there's two major camps that have been present out there for a while, traditional being one, mobile being the other, and modern being the recent addition to the party. We'll cover these in a little bit more detail here and kind of give you some definitions if you're unclear on which is which, right? So first up, we'll get into traditional device management. Traditional management is more consisting of a client-server architecture, right? So let me get back on track there. Sorry for the snafu. And you've got a management server that's out there that's communicating with agents that are installed on machines out there in that environment. And typically in those scenarios, the agents and the management server usually reside on the same network, right? That's more traditional. And if you think about how business has been conducted historically too, much more the spirit of everybody's in the office, right? Everybody comes into work, everybody's kind of centralized in these locations, um, and that's where this business would take place. So traditional management systems were designed for that sort of ecosystem, right? And those management servers in that sort of ecosystem there do have a really big degree of operational control over these devices, pertaining to the preparation of those devices for introduction into the workforce, right? Configuration of them and ongoing maintenance. Um, some common features of a traditional management system could include, um, come on, there we go, app distribution, or excuse me, device inventory. That's what that icon is for hardware and software. Configuration management abilities to include software distribution. That's where my head was at, and potentially uh, deeper levels of systems management like scripting, right? Beyond just being able to put an application on a device. Can I get in there and granularly configure that device, right? And last but not least, update management abilities to be able to deploy OS and application level patches. These are the kinds of things that you would typically see in a traditional management system. Next up is mobile. Mobile differs from traditional in that IT admins can configure policies for devices and push those policies over the air using MDM protocols. Um, the device is then enrolled to the MDM server and establishes a relationship through a configuration profile. So if you notice from traditional, one of its shining points was its ability to get deep. In mobile, I think one of its shining points, and one of the things that makes it stand out, is its ability to be flexible, to kind of be able to handle these things over the air, literally and metaphorically, right? The handle these devices wherever they're at. Just take different notes there. I think as far as the two different systems and what you would see with either of those. Some common mobile device management features would include something along the line of device inventory and tracking, where you can actually get into kind of location information about those particular machines. App distribution, or an enterprise app store, some sort of integration with that to be able to kind of deliver applications in that way, especially with dealing with mobile devices. You want to be able to just hit the app stores there. Some sort of remote device wipe or lock or reset functionality if I've got a problem with that device, if it's lost or stolen, kind of tying back into some of David's stuff there in a case of data breaches or things like that. If a device is lost, unrecovered, that's a potential data breach, if not an actual data breach, right? So, can I nuke that thing and make sure that nobody can access corporate data from that particular device there? So, that kind of functionality is definitely helpful. Application whitelisting and blacklisting would be another thing you'd probably see in a mobile device management solution, along with restriction enforcement. We'll get into that a little bit later too. It's in a little bit more detail, but those are your standard list of things you'd probably see in a mobile device management solution. So now we'll talk about modern device management, and with uh, as David was talking about, with that conventional network perimeter kind of dissolving, right? Devices are strewn across the globe. When COVID was hitting, I saw it virtually through just conversations with customers. I saw it physically here in town, watching IT departments have their people pull up to the front doors. They're loading PCs into the trunk of their cars to say, sorry, you can't work here, right? But you still need to kind of get stuff done. So let's figure it out. Um, that network perimeter kind of dissolved rather quickly, right? So businesses are finding themselves in a situation where more of their endpoints accessing corporate data now, they're outside that perimeter. There's not that secure little fence anymore that everybody sat inside. So that makes it much more difficult to manage these particular machines. And modern device management tries to solve this with solutions that can take advantage of mobile management styles, but still provide that good level of control that traditional was bringing to the party, right? That way, it doesn't matter um, where the device is at, right? It doesn't matter its location. You can manage it anywhere. You can do it securely, right? And be able to take care of this regardless of that sort of situation, right? Um, in the IT landscape, right? The good old days, we were talking about with that network perimeter, everybody was closely connected and internally protected. Um, you sat behind a firewall, everybody was safe. Um, and that was the main method of security. In today's day and age, many business workforces now are just roaming the fields free, um, but yet they still need to access that corporate data, right, from where they are, not necessarily where the data resides, right? So we've got a different sort of situation propping itself up here, and how do IT admins and IT teams handle that sort of thing, right? Um, I think beyond just looking at a specific product, right? Which I didn't want to come here and kind of just pitch you something. I wanted to be able to talk about more just strategy and how to move forward, how to internally question what we do as in our respective businesses, and where can I get myself into a better position to manage in a more modern way. I think first up, you've got to be able to have your users, have your devices connected, through cloud-based authentication, more specifically, single sign-on, that helps to secure your users. It's got many advantages, um, of which, you've got the reduction of password fatigue for your users, um, being able to relieve help desk workloads with fewer users calling in for help with lost passwords and whatnot. It can help to simplify username and password management. When changes of personnel take place, SSO can reduce the IT effort and opportunities for mistakes, right? In many scenarios, especially when people like me are pitching products and stuff like that, a lot of people get in there and talk about the beginning. When an employee comes on board, right, and talk about new hire type stuff, or that onboarding process. What about offboarding? I think SSO helps in that regard. So obviously setting up a new user, it's nice if SSO is tied into a lot of my business applications, a lot of my systems that I use. It's sort of being able to just turn that on, and they've got access to whatever I've delegated them to have access to. If they end up leaving um, and move on to other places or whatnot, SSO definitely comes into play there in a very helpful way by kind of turning off their access and not having to um, go hunt around for all the little places they were able to access data, different apps and whatnot. I left a particular company years ago, was still able to access some of their unified communication programs and whatnot for years later. I could still sit in there and listen to conversations and whatnot. Not that I did, but I noticed I could. But I guess what I'm trying to say is with SSO, you can kind of turn it off at the main rather than looking for a specific faucet somewhere, right? I can kind of control that access at a more centralized point. So definitely very helpful in that regard as far as moving towards a modern style of management. And I think with SSO, companies can strengthen their identity security with techniques like multi-factor authentication as well, right? So if you use that, you probably already do for devices in the office. Now applying that to your network and external applications that are used for working from home, tying that in with your SSO procedures might be something to consider there. It ensures only authorized users access your corporate network when they provide two or more credentials, right? Your password, something and then some who you are, I think is what it is, right? So something like biometrics, hardware tokens, a location, things like that. Some of these credentials can depend obviously on the hardware they're using. Um, so current MFA solutions that you're using, take a double check and make sure that they're working for people now that they're using a personal endpoint device at home, right? Some MFA strategies that worked while they're in the office may not work now. So just something to consider there. It's
Cody, I'm sorry
tempting
to
to,
interrupt.
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there's a lot of great questions coming in here from the audience, and one of them is around. It sounds like what you're saying here. They're asking is, is SSO really a best practice to implement to kind of prevent data loss prevention, like employees potentially having access to data once they're gone, or having access to company devices once those devices leave the company?
Absolutely. It's part of this overarching strategy. It isn't like the one thing, but it is one of many different things. It's a fantastic way to be able to be the gatekeeper for your users in that regard, right? If they offboard and they're not here anymore, do I have an opening, a side window open? I haven't gone and checked, right, to make sure it's locked back up. So it is definitely a best practice, I think, to try to see where that can be implemented in your environment, not just straight domain credentials, but as I go and access different applications themselves, am I being authenticated? Um, and if so, can I do that in a more seamless way? So, when I was talking earlier, I'm glad you bring that up, David, because, just circling back real quick on that whole password fatigue thing. If you've got a type of environment where they're literally logging into every little thing, that tends to reduce their productivity, that tends to make their password strategies a little bit more lax because they just want it to be simple. So why not make it simple on your end, right, for them, as far as being able to kind of have single sign on, being able to have a primary means of authentication. I think that's a fantastic way to approach that as far as the question's concerned. Is it a best practice? Absolutely. Definitely should be looked at and considered as how you can fit it in, not necessarily whether or not it fits in.
Yeah, and it sounds like, especially in the age of the great resignation, as they're calling it, or some folks have called it the great reshuffle.
Yeah,
We really need to be protecting ourselves as a company to make sure that as employees leave, they don't have access to data that they shouldn't have access to. So
absolutely.
many more great questions coming in. I'll save those for upcoming
No problem.
topics.
You jump in and let me know whenever you got questions coming in. I'll be happy to try to discuss them there. So kind of jumping on that point there, right? We're talking about authenticating users in that sort of SSO sort of way. If I've got the ability to apply that to my applications, that's definitely nice, right? Hence the title of the slide. Apps should follow that sort of path if they can. 365 is a great example, right? It kind of ties into your, you can have it tie into your Azure AD, and it's just seamless at that point. It authenticates you. As you go in and access that. It's just, yeah, it just works, right? And that you want to be able to kind of recreate that where you can with your other business applications and whatnot. It's not as common, like the picture on the left there anymore. Everybody's together working on things in a singular location, right? It's more like that picture on the right where everybody's meeting together virtually. Um, the remote work and the virtual meetings has definitely become the norm and become a lot more common. So from an IT perspective, it's useful to use business apps that follow that same path we're talking about, hopping on that SSO bandwagon for continuous and secure authentication. Um, Beyond just authenticating, right? It's placement and method of access, right? Can that app be now accessed from anywhere? Um, can I was that only accessible back with a traditional type of concept, client a server sort of architecture type of thing? I had to physically be there or physically be connected to that server, right, on the physical local network or something like that. Was that the only way this particular application runs? Can it be um, positioned in such a way that I can access this regardless of location, right? That's definitely something to think about now moving forward for IT management strategies is, can I position that stuff for my users in that way? The goal too, I think, on top of this is making sure that those devices, where in times past and in the historical stages there, of business, those devices played a significant role in housing data. They housed data locally, and um, as David was talking about earlier, with breaches, with lost and stolen devices, whatnot, if we can begin to treat those devices more as conduits, more as a way to access the corporate data. Let the corporate data be housed in a secure repository. Let me just have some front end that goes and accesses that, right? If I can introduce that concept into my business application usage, that's definitely, I think, helpful for people in a more modern sort of management style. Um, if your business isn't ready for that kind of stuff, I mean, you start to, in your head, go through the inventory of the applications you use, how your users go and access certain things to do certain business functions. Are you ready for that or not, right? If your business application in question that you're thinking of, um, isn't ready for any sort of application replatforming, I guess, if that's not right for you, um, is there a way to potentially kind of rehost the application using infrastructure as a service, right? Azure VMs, or being able to kind of host it at that point. Is that potentially one way to be able to look at refactoring that app for use in a more modern way? Um, can I find some sort of SaaS ready application similar to what I'm using, that achieves the same goal, right? Productivity tools or data access or whatever category you're in. Is there something out there that does what this particular app does, but does it in a more flexible way, right? Maybe that's something to look at and consider as well. Um, on top of that question, I would also layer this other question of, would data migration then to this new offering be worth it, right? That's something you've got to consider there as well, right? Um, with a business app, can I potentially refactor it just by containerizing it, right? Can I use platform as a service at that point, kind of like VMs, but containers are more kind of just bare bones operating system, just enough to run it, and then the application itself, right? And it's cloud based, so I can potentially reduce the load on my internal or local data center there. If I'm not built for that sort of access, I can host that in that regard, right? Let somebody else manage that load for me. So is that a way to look at this particular business application and how it can be replatformed and put to use within my environment in this modern way? Last but not least, if any of those don't work, am I looking down at this particular application and kind of wondering, do I just need to recode this thing, right? Does it need to be rebuilt using more modern code at this point? Can it be used? Can it be refactored into a web authentication and just migrated to the cloud? Is there a way? Is that business app malleable enough to be able to be rejiggered there in that fashion, right? In a more zero and one point of view, right? Getting down and actually modifying that code to be able to make sure that it gets back to the goal we're looking at, being able to access this stuff from anywhere, but accessing it securely. Those are definitely things I think you need to keep in mind. So we talked about access, we talked about the applications in a more modern management way, right? These are things that fold into that modern management system, right? They're revolving around that thing. It isn't the thing, but it helps the thing, right? It helps that modern management solution be able to operate successfully.
Jody, one more question here that came in. They're asking
Yeah.
about VPN. When the
Mm,
pandemic hit, everybody jumped to implement their remote access system, and
yeah.
most of them were using VPN, or many were. What's your take on VPN? Is that a good long-term solution, or just kind of a break fix until we redesign our applications for the future?
That's a great question. Yeah. It is a viable solution, right? And that part of the question is really interesting to kind of sit there and think about. And I think businesses have to answer this individually. Is it a short term thing? Is it a long term thing? I think of When I think of that, I wonder and consider the costs of implementing and maintaining that VPN solution. I can't imagine that's the cheapest thing to do. Being able to have that sort of continuous access over those sorts of distances there. So that would come into my mind as far as something to consider. Is it worth keeping? Can I implement it and at least make sure that it's in place so that these particular business applications can be accessed in a near similar fashion, right? If I can mimic the look and feel, the smell of being on the local network, right? Then everything's okay. If that helps me continue to do business and be productive and service my customers and be able to grow my company, that's definitely something I'll put in place. But I think, yeah, long term, I'm keeping an eye on that. I'm discussing that with colleagues, and I'm wondering, okay, um, is the value of this VPN solution worth the cost? Can we pivot the spend on that into refactoring the applications themselves, right? So these are definitely thoughts I would probably want to bring up in amongst my peers and whatnot, and form a strategy around. That's a great question, and um, I like the fact that I don't have a hard and fast answer to that. I think it's going to depend on what people need, and it's going to depend on how long they need it. I think that's a really interesting part of that question you brought up, David. Whether or not it was kind of a break fix or short term, or whether or not it was long term. But um, hopefully that helps answer the
Yeah,
question.
it does. Yeah, and I guess it's good to keep in mind that just because someone's using VPN, that gives them more secure network access, but they're still using an endpoint with the
Yep.
VPN, and that endpoint still needs to be secured in some way. So,
Yep. You're right. I mean, we've at least been able to kind of lock this tunnel down that they're operating in. But you're right. We're still leaning on some older styles of management there, and if that works for the time being, great. But I'm constantly reevaluating that, right, to see if that's still something that is just as useful moving forward or not. So that's a great question. All right, let's see. So we've been talking about these things around the management solution. One thing I wanted to bring up in the management solution, right, modern management solution, something it needs to have is the ability for perpetual enforcement, right? Um, you need the ability to not just be limited to a one and done sort of scheduled task sort of thing. Like I just send this out and it went fine, right? It went successfully, but how do I know whatever application I distributed, whatever configuration settings I deployed? How do I know they're still there a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, right? So my modern management solution isn't just kind of getting something out the door, loading something in the truck and sending it to its destination. It's being able to evaluate the state of that device um, on some sort of recurring cadence there, hopefully, somewhat frequent, to be able to say, are you still in a compliant sort of state, right? I say compliant there to say, IT has crafted a state in which this device should be operating, from the applications it has on it to the configuration settings it has to the restrictions around that particular device and what it can do, what it can't do. That is, a compliance state at that point, and is that device compliant or not? Can I have something that helps me not have to go physically double check that stuff, blindly repush things out just for the sake of repushing? Let my modern management system have a policy management sort of functionality to it that can just check that stuff for me, right? Making sure that all that stuff's in place. So as you look ahead, looking internally at existing management solutions you have, and looking forward to consider anything you may need. That's definitely something I would want you to consider and pause and take thought on is, do I have that functionality currently? And is that part of what I'm looking for moving forward? Right. So there is that. Now, there's all this stuff we've thrown at you about being able to move to some sort of modern management solution. And I could very well sound like the snake oil salesman. Is go, it's great, it's going to solve everything. And you're wondering, what are some reasons to incorporate this into my business practices? Why would I even want to do this in the first place? And I think when talking to customers, both we've done surveys and just my conversations with people and whatnot. I think you come across some areas here. First off, being people just want the basics. They want uh, uh, something not as complex and complicated as it can be out there with some particular management solutions, right? They want um, the ability to have some device enrollment sort of capabilities where back to the onboarding stuff we are talking about, right? New user comes on, so new device. Um, in days gone by, that would mean it's got to make a visit to IT. They've got to spend 1, 2, 5 days, prepping a machine, putting that sort of desired configuration state on that machine before they send it out. Nowadays, I think the transformation of IT, you're seeing more IT teams looking at devices from vendors and saying, that's good enough. I'll lay down on top of it what I need from a configuration and restriction point of view, right? Let's get to the real nitty gritty stuff, not just the apps, right? But I can secure this thing how I need it to be without having to go through all that prep work on the back end. So I can drop ship this device. Does my management solution allow that to work in a very seamless way? Can I have a device come online, hit the internet, know what it needs to do, right? So from a Windows perspective, am I integrated with autopilot? um, Apple, Apple Business Manager DEP stuff, with Android Zero Touch, you get the idea. Can I fire this thing up for the first time and then it know what it needs to do as far as initial configuration and out of the box experience goes, right? That's definitely something to look for, I think, and keep in mind, because as we get into modern management, that's part of that. I think that ecosystem, that's part of that culture, is um, being able to be more flexible in device distribution, getting that out to my users and whatnot. I need to be able to, with this particular management solution, make sure I've got something that's turnkey. I mean, it's up and running quickly. I'm getting return quickly, right? I don't have to spend um, weeks and months of consulting necessarily to kind of get this thing implemented, because it's that complex to operate. I need something I can just kind of plug in and turn on. I'm oversimplifying with that particular phrase, but you get what I'm saying, as far as that's what people are looking for, right? I need to be able to, I think, look at device management using profiles, meaning I want a lighter footprint on the device. I want to make sure that if there's agentry involved, it's not um, like the old days. I think, early days of antivirus and stuff like that. You kick off, or you have a scheduled scan. You're due for a coffee break at that point because that machine's doing nothing else but that scan at the right. You want agentry that's lighter and not as impactful during business time, right? Business hours and whatnot. So that's something I think people are looking for. I think people want it easy. I think they just want this stuff to work. They want an intuitive interface, not have to jump through hoops to go find things. They want an easy user experience, right? Um, I think on the back end there, I think subscriptions are gaining in popularity. It changes the game for admins there. They get to make an OpEx change, kind of pay for what they need, um, and simplify billing processes. Perpetual licensing is helpful in some situations, not always the fit for every situation. So being able to kind of just grow or contract as I need to with subscriptions. I think that's definitely something people are interested in and looking into. Um, Cloud-based, I think, is definitely something people are wanting and looking into here. It's less infrastructure to manage. It's less capital expense to incur. I'm shifting to letting somebody else manage that infrastructure for me. I can go focus more on day-to-day business stuff. In that regard, right? So I think from an ease of use perspective, that definitely comes into play. Less on-premise stuff to kind of manage there in my back room, the better. I think people just want to be able to have proper control. I think last off, I think they want a management solution that um, adds to your overall zero trust strategy with remote modern type management. And notice um, I didn't say this modern management solution was your zero trust strategy, right? It contributes to an overall zero trust strategy, right? That trusted user, trusted device, trusted network, kind of concept. It's bolstering that up, not trying to do the whole thing. A lot of different parts play a role in that. Um, when we were talking about data breaches and things like that, lost and stolen devices, does this management solution have the ability, regardless of where that device is at, and even if I don't know where it's at now, somebody left it at an airport, left it at a train station, whatever, um, do I have the ability to kind of wipe, lock, reset that device type of thing, right? So in the case of theft and data breach, um, I can't remember the source, but I'll throw out the number anyways, just for you guys to at least consider here. It's not big. There's like a 7% recovery rate last I read, or something like that, for lost and stolen devices, right? That IT is able to get back. So, in reference to data breaches, that's a lot of risk laying around out there um, in the parking lot, in the library, in the McDonald's, wherever I left this device. Um, there's high risk for data um, breaches there if people can get into that and access data off of that thing. So, if my management solution, upon learning of this particular event, helps me be able to kind of make that device um, a moot point in accessing my corporate data, if I can reset it, wipe that thing, so that there isn't those um, pre-existing sort of doors they can just walk in and open. Um, that's a really good thing to have at that point, and for you specifically, ups that recovery rate, right? That average rate of 7% to something hopefully much more palatable. um, Last but not least, right, all this sort of stuff, customers, people just want to be able to keep their corporate data protected. They want to not be one of these statistics that we see, not be one of these businesses that's getting hit every 11 seconds. They just want to be able to kind of keep things safe there. So, um, this is definitely stuff I think to keep in mind as far as what people are asking, people like yourselves, when they go to kind of the why of this whole conversation. Um, to layer on top of that some things I think you would want to look at. I don't know if it's a how or whatnot, but we'll get into this here. Some probing questions for your own company here would be, um, in moving to a modern management strategy, what's my reliance on my corporate network? Do things have to happen there, or can they happen anywhere, right? Um, what is my on-premise data center need? Again, is it our policy that everything's got to be managed by us? Are we able to offload this to providers, right? Trusted providers, and be able to manage that infrastructure for me, so I don't have to necessarily keep my data center here? Um, what's my content delivery strategy, right? In traditional management solutions, um, for large distributed or more distributed customers and whatnot, they'd have to set up these kind of um, distribution points, different staging servers, things like that across wherever their company holds ground, right? Um, so that not everybody was getting stuff straight from one location. That helps in those scenarios. It's not a bad thing. I'm not downplaying that, but that's extra work. That's extra stuff to maintain. In a modern management scenario, I think you're going to see more cloud-based, more internet-based solutions to help with that content delivery, to where no matter where they are, right, a CDN is just going to be able to make sure that's available um, in the place that user's at, right, and be able to kind of get that stuff from anywhere. So when I look at how I handle things currently in my organization, do I need to maintain all those delivery points? Is that something I can change? Is that something I can migrate away from? Am I ready to use SSO based strategies to deliver cloud applications instead? Right? We talked about that earlier. These are things you definitely are adding to your checklist. I think of if you're trying to craft a checklist of things to kind of ask and start to look at, start to discuss amongst your peers and your management, if we're ready for this or not. So hopefully the answers you discover from these sorts of questions will help add context and detail, explain your current style, kind of expose that to everybody. Hey, this is where we're at, and so how does that differ from where we want to go, and help identify your future goals there. So you may not be ready at this point to handle that sort of thing. I see you popping on there, David. You got a question for me?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've been giving us a great overview here of the devices and kind of the best practices and things to look for. But I'm curious for the folks out there who are kind of using traditional legacy endpoint management solutions. I'm wondering if you can kind of give us a roadmap to the steps we should take to get to a modern endpoint management solution.
Yeah. Let's see. I think getting into. Well, I think I'll bring up my next slide as we get into that. Actually, I think moving from traditional is checking with that particular management solution vendor to see if they offer something, if they're looking forward as well. If not, we know some people. But making sure that can I migrate to an existing offering type of thing? Can I move towards um, modern in a non-painful way? Can I have a cloud-based um, management solution there versus on-prem type of thing? Can I have these devices be able to connect back to this management server regardless of connection, right? So if there's agentry involved with this management solution, can it handle that um, transcendence of network at that point, right? To be able to talk no matter where it's at. I've got you. Yeah, I don't have to hit you in a UNC path. That's not going to work over the internet type of thing. You get what I'm saying? I'm not going to be able to hit a local IP or something like that. Can I talk no matter where I am? Um, we didn't bring up this, and I look at this slide, and I'm glad it's here now. But we didn't talk about unified, and that's been a big thing that people have been talking about and wondering where they need to go. I think these are not the same. To help back circle back onto kind of our first point of this whole presentation, kind of help provide clarity and definition. They're not the same, right? Hopefully, you saw with modern, it was trying to lift up this management solution to be more flexible, to be more accessible, while still hopefully, not losing a large degree of the granular control people may be used to with those more traditional systems, right? It's incorporating the spirit of that traditional management system in with what it does. Unified is being able to reach some level of convergence with your management solutions to where you're not spending all your time managing the management solutions. You're managing the devices. Um, it's no secret that a lot of different companies have different point solutions for different things, right? They may use something for asset management, something for inventory, something for patch management, something for content delivery, whatever, right? They may have different things that solve those different things. Look for a way to be able to kind of pull all that together. Again, I know somebody that does that. The big old K sitting right there that does that sort of stuff too, right? So that's something I think you want to look at. Is your management vendor got a strategy for that? Are they looking at what they provide you and looking at ways to improve that, right? To be able to bring things together in a more unified way. So that's again not the same thing as modern, but they incorporate themselves in with each other, right? It's being able to kind of have uh, a way to access all this stuff in a seamless single pane of glass sort of way. But again, back to that whole being able to be flexible and whatnot. So, excuse me. I think back to your question, rambling aside there, David, I would say look where you are, see if what around you is available to grow. If it's not, look elsewhere and see who out there has the ability to help you grow. I know we here at Case are definitely in a scenario where we try to act as trusted advisors to you, a customer, or whatnot, and try to match up solutions that handle any sort of essential needs you have there. So look for somebody like that, or look at us. That can help too. Um, but I think that's kind of where you need to head, though. Yeah, I'm going to try to stop my rambling there. Try to look at where you're at now with your management style and see where it can be migrated from what we're talking about. Being able to incorporate into SSO cloud-based things, accessibility, flexibility. That's the stuff on the checklist that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very wise advice, very well spoken. Bradford out there in the audience said, "Work from anywhere, manage from anywhere," and I think that's a good way to put it
That's
as
dead on.
well.
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah, thank you for that comment. Let's see, we've got a lot of great questions still coming in. Um, do you want to start taking those questions now, or do you have some additional resources you'd like to chat about before then? Or
No, I think we're good. I'm trying to look at the rest of my slides here. I've got I think with the handouts, I think this is actually in there. So feel free to download from the handout section there. 5 steps to battle cybercrime with unified endpoint management. Hopefully, it'll provide a little bit more definition on the unified bit, right, as we talked about. I'll come back with David sometime in the future. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But with modern, hopefully, we gave you a good definition there. But yeah, David, let's go ahead and let's talk about questions. I guess what we got out there.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and thanks for putting that QR code up there. That's cool. You can just scan it with your phone. I encourage everyone to try that out. Or if you don't want to do that, just go to the handouts tab
Yeah,
and
go to
you'll
handouts.
find
It's right
that
there.
resource there, 5 steps to battle cybercrime, as well as numerous other resources. So let's see. Here's a good question. Michael's asking, do you recommend using network segments or setting up firewall rules to help with threats where endpoint management might not be enough?
That's potentially helpful. That you make me pause for a moment because that's definitely kind of traditional level thinking that I think can carry over. In scenarios where if you can, fire management, right? If I can shut down the airflow to a section of a building or something like that, if I can lock up fire doors, right? That area is contained. It's not affecting other places and stuff. So, Michael, I think that sort of strategy. I think is definitely helpful. I think I would look into that and see how that can be applied. Weighing that whole cost of effort versus value type of deal, I think you probably can make an easy argument for value. So absolutely, I think that's something to consider.
Okay. Excellent. And then let's see, here's another question Paul was asking, and we may have answered this in the chat a little bit earlier, thanks to our team from Quest Case who's on here. But might be good for everyone to know the answer to this one. Could this solution help us to deploy a custom image to a remotely connected computer?
So with our systems deployment appliance, right, if you're looking at image, right, OS image deployment, um, your remote site appliance is your best bet, right? So that's kind of our satellite point, wherever that may be. So in the case of like to somebody's home, that's interesting. I don't know currently how we could handle a task of that magnitude right down to that sort of specific location. But if they're at least at remote offices or at places where they can access that remote site appliance, that would be the way we'd be able to kind of fulfill that sort of need is in a decentralized way. Doesn't have to come straight from HQ, but it can be a little bit closer to home in that regard.
Okay. Excellent. And
That's
then there
heavy
was a
lifting
question
right there.
about,
And that's a tough question to answer, right? OS imaging's no joke. So, yeah, that's big. Go ahead. Sorry.
absolutely. Yeah, and I know you talked about zero trust. I mean, a lot of companies market zero trust as a silver bullet solution. Where do you see
Handy
endpoint
buzzword.
management fitting into zero trust?
So, that's great. We're doubling back on some of the stuff we were talking about there, right? So if SSO and MFA are kind of handling the user, endpoint management's handling the device and a little bit of the user too, right? I think that you're going to see in the futures of endpoint management more focus on that, but it plays an overall part into that, right? It is not by any means, nor should you trust anybody that says their management solution is a one-stop shop for zero trust type of deal. They're really trying to milk what they can from that buzz term. But it's got to contribute to that overall strategy. And I think that's where modern endpoint comes into play, is being able to kind of, if I've got things in place to know that the user is good, let me see what I can put in place and to make sure that if I need to know that the device is good, let me have something in place that helps me do that, right? Conditional access policy sort of management there to be able to kind of say this device has passed my checks. So yeah, you can go ahead and do what you need to do. I think it's part of, hopefully I answer your question there. It's not the thing, but it's kind of one of those things, right? It handles one of those areas where it's more device centric, not as user centric yet, but I think it will be.
Nice. Nice. And then I know we're starting to run out of time here, just 2 minutes left in our webinar time slot, but someone out there mentioned they're already evaluating Quest case. For folks who are on the event today, they want to learn more, they want to maybe try this out for themselves. What do you recommend? What's the best way to go about that?
You can definitely get a hold of us for go to quest.com there. I'm trying to remember an easy URL in my head. That's why I'm pausing and stumbling at the moment. Go in there and look for case products and whatnot. You'll be able to find trial downloads of our systems management appliance, our system deployment appliance, right? Our on-prem solutions that help in that more traditional way. For our more modern management solution there we're offering with Case Cloud. You can go to subscriptions.casecloud.com if I'm not mistaken, and sign up for a trial there and give it a run right there off the web, right? So hit that URL if you need to and test that out. So quest.com for the on-prem stuff, and then like I said, for the cloud, just go to subscriptions.casecloud.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, more great questions are still rolling in here. We'll have to try to get back to those electronically, but sounds like it's super easy to get started. You've given us so much information to think about when it comes to modernizing our endpoint management and better protecting our companies from these malicious attacks and ransomware infections. So, Jody, it's been a real pleasure having you on the webinar today. Thank you so much.
It was great talking with you, David. I hope everything was helpful today. I hope we're able to help some people out there at least get a better idea where to go. But thanks for having this conversation with me. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
I did as well. And thank you, of course, to everyone out there in the audience for joining us. For more information, don't forget about the handouts tab. There's looks like 6 different resources there that you can check out. Just click on those. They'll open up a new web browser tab or window there in your web browser, which will stay around after the event ends, and you can check those out. Thank you to everyone for all the excellent questions. And then before we go, I do want to announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. This is going out to Jill Kennel from Oregon. Congratulations, Jill Kennel from Oregon. And we'll reach out to our best question prize winner as well. I hope that you learned a lot and have a great day. See you next time. Thanks, Jody.
Thank you, David.
Thank you to our friends at Quest. Bye-bye.